The conventional wisdom would have told you, don't go. Because, if you go, you'll internationalize, you'll hyphenate. What did you expect? Would you have asked or expected them to put a rubber stamp and say, yes, you did a great job by going after the terrorists? So that, I think, was a problem in our narrative, that we were not as frontal as we should have been. The signaling you got from the world was that they were okay, they understood what's going on, but they were hesitant to put it in black and white. Finally, on the morning of the 10th, we hit him with such force that he had no option but to raise the white flag. I mean, they hit, but if I'm sure you talk to our military people, the swarms were just a big ruse of the drones. I mean, most of them were dummy, they were ineffective. This time around, there's no comparison to the scale, the sheer scale and the lethality of the Indian response in Pahalgam compared to Balakot. The much bigger problem, in my opinion, is China and the nature of the China-Pakistan military and security relationship. What did you want? What would be diplomatic success? Have you been sanctioned? Have you been hauled over the coals? Has there been a United Nations resolution condemning the Indian attack or the Operation Sindoor? Mr. Trump has a certain way of dealing with the world. What he has said is what he has said. It is not going to make any difference to India's position.
Hello and welcome to HT's weekly talk show, The Interview. Following the ceasefire, there are some basic questions that people are asking. Who won the war? Why did India agree to a hasty and, more importantly, an unconditional ceasefire? Did USA mediate as President Trump claims? And what is the Kirana story? Who better than Pankaj Saran to decode these issues for us? An expert in national security affairs, Saran has served in key positions in the Prime Minister's office. He was Deputy National Security Advisor under Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Mr. Pankaj Saran here with us in this edition of HT's weekly talk show, The Interview. Welcome to the show, Mr. Pankaj Saran, and thank you for being here with us.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you.
You know, this interview is about the basics, questions that are top of the mind of citizens. But before I come to that, let me ask you, what is your take about the all-party delegation outreach to several countries? Many see this as India being on the back foot.
No, I think it's absolutely essential for the India story to be heard in capitals that matter. Both friends, those who are on the fence, and everyone else who has an interest in what happens in India or between India and Pakistan. It's important to convey the message, number one. And number two, I think it's also important to show that there is a national consensus. People from different political parties, opposition, ruling party, are actually going across to put forward a case. I don't think it's a question of being on the back foot. I think it's actually the opposite, where you say you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to be defensive about, but you have a very strong narrative and the truth is on your side. I think it's a great thing. It's a very well thought through campaign, targeted. So I believe the purpose is to talk not just to government, but to parliamentarians, to media, to think tanks, to opinion makers, and just put across the view.
But why this time? Because in the past, whether it was Balakot, Uri, Pulwama, we didn't do this.
Well, we've done it in the past. I mean, there have been cases where Mr. Vajpayee, as you know, led the Indian delegation to the United Nations.
Yes, I know, but I'm saying recent past, during Mr. Modi's tenure.
Yeah. I think this is a different model and a system of response to terrorism, where the conventional wisdom would have told you, don't go. Because, if you go, you'll internationalize, you'll hyphenate. I think this time around, the story and the belief inside the system and the government is that actually you should not hesitate. Because there are two ways to do this. One is to keep quiet and let the world say what they want to say. The other is to say, I'm coming to you and I'm explaining. So you can cut it both ways. I think in this particular exercise, it comes from the confidence rather than from a defensive attitude about the fact that you need to say this. And if we didn't do it in the recent past, that may be for different reasons. But even after 2008, Mumbai, we mounted a huge campaign. But we did go around, explain.
Do you see this, as many do, a shift in India's foreign policy? And is this a bid to woo the world, given that many of our allies didn't stand with us during Pahalgam or post-Pahalgam?
So I think on the 22nd, when Pahalgam, the incident took place, and for a few days immediately after, I think a huge amount of support poured in. And that support basically said 2-3 things. Number one, we condemn what happened. Number two, we recognize your right to self-defense. And we also recognize your right to seek justice for the victims. So there was no equivocation in the reaction. So I think that was a good sign. It was a very strong diplomatic support. There was no ifs and buts.
Post-Sindoor?
But post-Sindoor, the situation changed. And, so let's step back a little bit. What would you have wanted from the international community? What did you expect? Would you have asked or expected them to put a rubber stamp and say, yes, you did a great job by going after the terrorist camps? It's unlikely in this day and age. The maximum you could have expected was silence, which you actually got. There was very few calls for de-escalation by the international community. So in some ways, or rather in many ways, the signaling you got from the world was that they were okay, they understood what's going on, but they were hesitant to put it in black and white. And the fact that you got away with all of this action without any serious repercussions, no one is calling you to explain your action, either in the Security Council or bilaterally. And so basically, what did you do? You did what you wanted, unfettered. There was no one holding you back. So you had that full freedom. But then you also exercised a degree of responsibility about how much to do. Yes, there was a few countries who extended much more vocal support, but I'm okay with everyone else being silent. How much can I keep living in the hope of seeking international endorsement for what I do? I think that, that kind of model has diminishing returns. And we've also tried it in the past, where we have appealed to international support, saying, look, we got hit. Can you sympathize with us? Can you tell Pakistan to stop? So the new thing in this episode is that it's a realization. We've been there, done that.
I take your point, but what about the equalization of India and Pakistan? The world kind of put us at par, and it was India and Pakistan rather than we the victims and Pakistan the perpetrator.
But in my opinion, this is a fleeting equalization. It is not going to stick because we've come a long way. We really have broken the hyphenation. And I think as we go forward, you will see that India will return back to its normal priorities of development, of economic growth. People recognize that there are these two countries, on different trajectories. The reality is that the equality, the equation has changed forever. If you plot the axes, then they're both going in opposite directions. I don't even know what to call it. Probably the word for it is fear of equalization. I don't see that as a real issue at all. I think, at the end of the day, you just have to be more confident about yourself. As a nation, I think that's the way to approach it.
We perhaps came across as overconfident and maybe didn't bargain, if I may use the term, of Pakistan hitting so hard and getting deep into India.
So that, I think, was a problem in our narrative, that we were not as frontal as we should have been. There is no question today that over those, let's say, 75, 80 hours or so, the last attacks that we mounted, the strikes on the morning of the 10th, were absolutely devastating and lethal. And you went and hit him 11 targets on these airfields, radars, air bases, where the core of his military capability. One of the important things to keep in mind is also the precision of the attacks, that you wanted to avoid collateral damage. He was laying traps for you that you might hit civilian targets. You avoided that. So I would say we achieved our strategic objectives. We hit the terror hubs. When he ratcheted up to military targets, we responded with greater force. And finally, on the morning of the 10th, we hit him with such force that he had no option but to raise the white flag. At every stage, we told them, look, we don't want to go further. If you are ready to stop, we are ready to stop. But if you want to go up the ladder of escalation, then this time around, let's be clear, we are ready and we will continue to raise the level of escalation. But at the end, as it finally happened, of course, we took our own decision to stop. So for me, what is remarkable about this whole story is not, as I explained to you, the way it began, but equally, and if not more importantly, how it stopped, how it ended. Because sometimes ending is much more difficult than beginning, and it requires equal amount of courage.
So what about the perception, and I'm using the word perception, that Pakistan hit back and hit hard?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at some of the stories that came out, on the first night, where there were swarms of drones, where there were missile attacks. So you can conjure up the image, and then the second night they retaliated with these things. And the 9th night again, they sent off some bigger missiles. I don't think it's very accurate to say they hit hard or they hit deep. I mean, they hit, but if I'm sure you talk to our military people, the swarms were just a big ruse of the drones. I mean, most of them were dummy. They were ineffective. They had some spy drones within, but our people knew that there will be retaliation. So they had planned to take the punch and also to then retaliate again. So I wouldn't characterize this. I would say, yes, he hit. That's his job. I mean, if he hadn't done even this much, what would he have done? But there was no real large-scale damage to any of our facilities. He was not able to penetrate our air defense system. That's one thing which I think is universally acknowledged now, that the air defense integrated system was very strong, very robust. He could not penetrate. On the other hand, if you talk about hitting deep and hard, imagine you hit him in Rawalpindi, you hit him 10 kilometers from Lahore. Who would have imagined all that?
And they targeted the Golden Temple as well, which was a cause of worry and probably the fear that they've really come deep into, which is what I was asking.
Well, I mean, deep in the relative sense. I mean, if you're talking in the Indian landmass, then deep, I would assume, would be Delhi, not Amritsar. It's almost on the border. That's not deep in a military sense. Whereas we went into, it's like, hitting 10 kilometers somewhere from Delhi. We did that. And that's where his maximum air defenses are. And then on the second night, we neutralized his air defense radar stations in Lahore. So in effect, he was without protection. He targeted military, but he also hit a few civilian casualties were there. But I think on balance, the Indian air defense system was really impregnable. He really could not penetrate. He may have done it after the Indian devastating strike on the 10th morning to those 11 airfields, Noor Khan, Sargodha, etc. But by then it was too late, because by then we had hit him so hard that he picked up the phone and asked for stopping the fight, stopping the fire.
But none of this was visible when it was the surgical strike and it just began and ended at the border. But this somehow was extended, where people who were even living in cities were really shaken up. So what was the difference?
This was also, in many ways, you're absolutely right. People in India were scared. People in cities, in the neighboring, along the border, even in Delhi and so on, the signs of these flares and all that. Of course, I agree. People were worried. But, this was a wake-up call. Even for us, forget about the Pakistanis and what they think, but even for Indians, it was a wake-up call that this is a national effort. It is not limited to some nighttime operation. And if you want to live in peace and security, and if you actually want to, move away from trying to garner sympathy for your losses and do nothing except, wipe tears, but you actually want to do something about it, then as a nation, you have to pay a price. Security doesn't come for cheap. There are so many lessons around the world where nations and people, they make sacrifices to live in peace, live in security, live the kind of life they want to live. You can't allow all that to be disrupted, which was the basic message of Pahalgam.
But why didn't that happen, as I was asking, post-Pulwama surgical strikes? So what was the qualitative difference between Pakistan, and again I'll use the word hitting back this time, not as severely as it retaliated perhaps earlier?
The difference between Pulwama and Pahalgam, in a sense, both are bad because there was loss of life. In Pulwama, it was your paramilitary forces. The manner of the attack was less brutal than Pahalgam. Pahalgam was innocence. It was completely on the lines of religion. So the lethality and the brutality was much, much more. That's maybe one reason, because the national anger was much more this time than in the case
Yes, but Pakistan retaliating in the measure that it did this time and didn't earlier?
Because their retaliation or their response was in some ways a function of your own retaliation. In the case of Pulwama, it was Balakot, it was targeted, it was contained, it was much smaller in scale. This time around, there's no comparison to the scale, the sheer scale and the lethality of the Indian response in Pahalgam compared to Balakot. So naturally, you can expect a higher degree of response from the other side. So it was all a function of what you did and therefore what he does. So, the scales of our response were different. The levels of anger were different. And I think above all, people have, had enough. There was nothing India had done before the April 22nd, which you could use as a reason for any terrorist attack.
So also in the past, nothing India had done. It was always Pakistan. So again, I'm wanting to understand, is that why did Pakistan, and of course you've said partly that it was because our response was different, so their retaliation was higher or more. But, this time it somehow was at everyone's doorstep, the retaliation, which it was not then. So somewhere we were at war this time, while earlier it was confined to maybe an operation or a strike. And
yeah, you could say that. But that's not the way we wanted it to pan out. We told them from the beginning, we don't want a war with you. We are just going for your terrorist camps. And they're all there. They're documented in the Security Council. They're no secret. They've been there for years. You had lived in this belief that they were too far away for India. India did not have the courage or the will to come and hit where they were. So we did all that. So they calculated differently, but we went in finally and did what we had to do. And they escalated to the military. And then, of course, if they escalate it to military, you have to respond.
Was it also because there was this time support from Turkey and maybe kind of back channel support from China, and Pakistan was in a stronger position than it was in the past events?
No, Pakistan has clearly been beefing up. There's no doubt, and our people know about it. It's not as if, our people are not watching. They're watching very closely. But we shouldn't overplay this contribution by Turkey and China. Each of them has a different role to play. The fact of the matter is that if you ask our people what was the quality of the drones, they will tell you they were very basic, very rudimentary kind of things. But yes, Turkey has a relationship that's a political, ideological, somewhat religious based. But Pakistan does not really have too many friends. I mean, if you look at it from that point of view, in terms of sources for military equipment. The much bigger problem, in my opinion, is China and the nature of the China-Pakistan military and security relationship. So I think one good thing, if one can say so, of this whole episode is that this relationship, the China-Pakistan relationship, has actually come out into the open. And so we know now much better than we did before what is the nature of this relationship and how we should prepare for it in future.
You said Pakistan doesn't have many friends. In fact, this is what's being said about India after the Operation Sindoor, that India was kind of isolated. And many see this as India's diplomatic collapse. Strong words, but...
yeah, that's a very strong words to use. What did you want? I mean, what would be in your description diplomatic success? Have you been sanctioned? Have you been hauled over the coals? Has there been a United Nations resolution condemning the Indian attack or the Operation Sindoor? In fact, the dominant sense of the world is basically silence. And that's okay for me. The world is a cruel place. I mean, you really cannot expect the kind of support or the endorsement you want every time. All major powers, all serious powers have to fend for themselves. The problem Pakistan faces today is that many of its friends, which it used to take for granted in the past, seem to have switched sides. And today they seem to be more happy and comfortable dealing with India rather than with Pakistan. The glue of Islam and the religious fraternity, which Pakistan used to basically bank upon in its relationship with India and would actually herd them together against India, I mean, that has failed.
The Pakistan failure is
You look at the
there.
Gulf. No, but...
what about India's success?
India's success, you look at the Gulf states, you look at the Islamic states, who has condemned what you did? In fact, the condemnation has been for the terrorist attack, not for the Indian attack, not for Operation Sindoor. So we have two things here. One is the terrorist attack and the other is the response. The condemnation has been overwhelmingly for the terrorist attack, not for the response. And that is something we should always keep in mind.
I know you're going to contradict me, but I will still push this and ask, what about Mr. Trump's alleged, and I'll underline the word alleged friendship with Mr. Modi? Even the US didn't stand with us.
No, look, see, again, Mr. Trump has a certain way of dealing with the world. He has a certain persona about him, which is very specific to him. He's the kind of person who lives by the social media. It's not India specific. I think we should be clear about that. If he had done what he did in terms of his tweeting only on this conflict or this problem and kept silent on all others in the world, I will accept your proposition that, oh my God, this is the only one he's chosen. But look at his track record of the last few months. So it's very much part of the pattern of the president and his persona. That's the first way to look at this. The second is what he has said is what he has said. It is not going to make any difference to India's position on either the problem with Pakistan or the question of terrorism or on Kashmir. So it was unfortunate, no question. We could have done without it.
So 2 points about US mediating and brokering the ceasefire, one. And second, that it was the trade bogey which he used to...
Actually, the trade bogey is the easiest to dismiss because, imagine in the thick of what's going on, people are awake the whole night. There is very intense action going on. Are you actually going to discuss trade? And is that going to be the carrot that you're going to give to the Indian leadership? That, please don't fire next missile because I'm going to do a trade deal with you. It doesn't work that way. It may be in his mind, maybe it's a figurative thing to say, stop fighting, let's focus on the economy. If that is what his intention is, that's fine. But it's so obvious that you're not going to discuss a trade deal at 10 in the night.
What about brokering the ceasefire?
So I don't know what the American administration's view on all of this is, but and I know this is an enterprise that is dead on arrival. It's not going to happen. It's not going to lead anywhere. It's something which is entirely between us and the Pakistanis. And there is really nothing much to broker out here. I mean, what is the solution? I want to ask these people who, talk that, we need to broker, we need to mediate. What do you want to broker? You want to broker peace? How do you want to broker the peace? I mean, it's very simple. I mean, you tell them to stop the terror. And as far as we are concerned, like our external affairs minister just said, what we want to talk to them about is when they were going to return Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. So what brokering do you want? I mean, I don't understand.
You spoke about Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, and Mr. Modi has also spoken and said that there's nothing to discuss with Pakistan except terror and POK. Bringing in POK center stage, while you say the narrative, of course, has changed, is it strategy? Is it optics? Or is it policy?
Well, it's an established Indian position. I mean, it is history, I would say. It's neither optics nor strategy. It is simply history. It is the history which dates back to the emergence of India as an independent nation.
Sure, but no Prime Minister has really articulated it and put it in black and white as the BJP government headed by Mr. Modi.
So that's a function of the BJP and the political ideology, and these were the planks on which the BJP won the election and believes in all of this. So that's a political choice that the ruling party has made, that I will put it right up front and center. But when you pass the parliament resolution in 1994, the BJP was not there. I mean, that time also the resolution stated very clearly the whole thing about the return of the Pakistan-occupied Kashmir part. So it's not as if the BJP is inventing something new. As I said, it's a history from August 15, 1947.
It's putting it up front.
But it's putting it up front, and also there is a unsaid aspect to it, that the previous governments did not do it as frontally as I am doing. And why they didn't do it was a mistake. I am not going to repeat that mistake. I am going to put it right up front and center.
And get POK for India?
That's the commitment. Now we will see what happens.
There is an angst about what many perceive as a hasty and unconditional ceasefire. What is your take?
Look, I'm glad you asked me this question. A lot of Indians are asking. This was never meant to be the final solution. This was never meant to be an open-ended Russia-Ukraine 3-year conflict or a Netanyahu-sponsored attack on the Hamas, which has been going on for 2 years. It was never meant to be that way. You showed two things. You showed the guts to go in and hit with hard power, but more importantly, the courage to stop. It was never intended to be an uncontrolled war with Pakistan. After all, this was messaging, it was signaling, not verbal, but by action. But you also know that you will live for another day. Supposing something else happens somewhere else in the future. This is not a situation where you unleash everything you have in your barrel, an empty or holster. That's not the way it was planned. It was highly restrained, highly calibrated. Repeatedly they were told, listen, I don't want to go further. You stop, I'll stop. So it was not at all hasty. That's the first question you asked. I think it was very well done. Now, you can always, in hindsight, because we are sitting on the outside, we're not inside, say, why did you stop on the 10th morning? You should have gone on till the 11th morning. And these are all hypothetical. These are military operational decisions.
Unconditional. People feel India should have got something in return. Now, I can't define that something, but that angst is there. इतनी जल्दी खत्म कर दिया 4 दिन में और खाली हाथ वापस आ गए.
No, I mean, look, that's okay for drawing rooms, but that's not the way real world works. And when you talked about the international opinion about India and the action, I would only tell you that a lot of the implicit and unsaid support we have is because we behaved responsibly. Remember, the military force that we displayed in these few days was only the tip of the iceberg of the Indian military machine. One force was not even used, the Indian Navy.
But what about the people's angst, the disappointment, and somehow the feeling we didn't do much?
No, that is something which is okay, is part of the emotion. But emotion cannot dictate policy. And I have to say, there's one thing about this Prime Minister and his set of the current cabinet and the system.
Given that you worked with him closely.
One thing you can say about they're not emotional. They're not emotional. They're cold, calculating. They're no fools. They know what has to be done, how much has to be done. And they always live for the day after. They don't live for the present. If I've done something today, I have to ask myself, what would be the consequence of this 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years down the line? And so everything that is done with great care, meticulous attention to detail.
Not emotional. What about his saying, "Ghar mein ghus ke marenge"?
That is political talk. That is part of being a leader in a moment of crisis. When you have to lead the country, you have to generate and you have to capture the feelings of the people. So that is a different issue. But when you sit with your advisors, with your military top brass, with your planners, security planners, you have to be more restrained. I mean, you can't be foolhardy.
Why is it then that many feel that the Prime Minister's image, unfortunately, has taken a hit in this?
I don't know why that is so. In fact, the amount of, if you talk to our armed forces, they are so happy with his leadership and with his, and when he said that I've given a free hand to the forces. So it depends who you talk to. This question which you asked, the answer depends on who you ask. And but I would say my own talking around to people is that people are happy that you actually finally, first time since 1947 have taken a stand against terror. Of course you'll pay a price for it. Nothing happens. If you don't take a stand, you won't pay a price. In my own assessment, I think he stands tall as someone who actually took the action, took the risk. It wasn't easy, but he took the risk, and here we are today.
Unanimity on that, and most people agree that he took a stand, but somewhere the general perception, and I'm saying person on the street, is that strong leadership, resolve, will do it, घर में घुस के मारेंगे, पर पूरी तरह नहीं मारा.
Wait, that's what I'm telling you. You can't allow that beyond a point to dictate policy. I mean, you have to run a country, you have to run a nation. I'm not going to allow Pakistan to drag me down like this. I will do what I need to do, but I'm clever enough to back off when I think my message has gone and my purpose is served. But I'll be foolish if I allow him to dictate my agenda. That is not happening. That is not happening. That much strategic sense, I think, has been shown.
You were happy with my earlier question, so I'm going to push this a little more and ask you, how would you sum up the situation and the events which have unfolded? In other words, who won the war?
We, India won the war. Why? Because we achieved our objectives. How do you describe winning or losing? It's very simple. Firstly, it wasn't a war, but let's leave that aside. We won the war for the simple reason that you achieved the objective you set out to achieve. And from my point of view, that's the only litmus test of success. You wanted to hit the terror, you hit. You told him, stop it, he didn't. He escalated, you said, I'll escalate double. You did that. And finally, who made the call to whom? Did India pick up the phone and call the Pakistanis and say, listen, let's stop?
Exactly. That was the only face saver, perhaps. And some feel that having mounted the tiger, India also wanted to get off. And that call was really the perfect escape route or exit plan.
No, that is an interpretation. You see, you can always interpret events to suit your narrative. But the fact of the matter is that we had told him from the beginning, look, we don't want a war with you. We're not interested. All I'm telling you and the whole world is, there are all these bad people living inside your country which you have done nothing about. I will do it for you, and let's stop it there. I think everything we said was coming from a real position of strength in a certain way. So there was no empty bravado, there was no, rabble-rousing. I think it was cold, calculated, calibrated, and from my point of view, the objective set for this Operation Sindoor has been achieved. What happens tomorrow, I don't know. But for the limited purposes of Sindoor, the fact that the message went that if there is terrorism, there'll be a price to pay.
Finally, what is your sense of the Kirana story? And of course, you will dismiss what the US is saying about averting a nuclear conflict. But what about the Prime Minister saying that nuclear blackmail will not be tolerated?
Yeah, so I'm glad you asked this. This is another fundamental takeaway from Operation Sindoor. I think it marks a completely new stage of evolution of India's security and strategic and military doctrine, where you are challenging the other side to say that your nuclear threshold and nuclear umbrella, both of them, are no longer a guarantee to you to make yourself immune from any response of which I may have. And I think we have broken that, busted that myth that, oh my God, because you're nuclear, you're effectively telling me I can do nothing. Because if I do anything, you'll press the button. I've just shown to you and to your people mostly, and to the world, that you've been bluffing the whole world for all this time. That I still have options. I can go from 0 to 100 without pushing you to the stage where you press the button. And I have therefore proved to you that I have non-diplomatic means, or let's say military means, to target and to hit terrorists, which is my primary problem. So I think I've done that. Then on this question of the nuclear aspect, I think the Foreign Secretary and others have said very clearly that there was actually no nuclear signaling, although in the initial few days, there were lots of reports coming about an announcement and its withdrawal by the Pakistanis of a meeting of the National Command Authority, etc. So it seemed that in that fog, there was something going on. But finally, nothing happened.
We didn't go as far as Kirana?
I don't know the details because I'm not in the system. But I know one thing, we hit Nur Khan, we hit Chaklala, and that's very close to where all these things are kept and their assets and everything else.
So what was the message?
I think the message was very grievous and very serious that, look, don't mess with me. I mean what I say. Now, if you've got used to a different India for the last 70 years, that's not my problem. But, please, gentlemen, understand that this is another kind of India you're facing. And so from that point of view, I think, again, Operation Sindoor will become a case study of how India blew this whole myth created by Pakistan and perpetrated even among Indians, that, I can't touch you because you have a gun to your head, which you will shoot at, and you'll shoot me also, and you'll destroy everyone. That myth has really been broken. And that's a huge message of enormous proportion to their military planning. So if I have kind of, in a sense, removed that security from you, then what else do you have to protect yourself?
So was US in one sense overstating that it averted a nuclear conflict?
Yeah, because for the rest of the world, they have bought this Pakistani narrative that, even if there's a little skirmish on the border, the next thing you know is these nuclear powers will go at each other. So there is an element of exaggerated fear and a kind of a doomsday scenario, which doesn't take much time to, show itself. So I would say, yes, we treat it with a pinch of salt. Of course, both are nuclear. It's there. But what we've just shown is that we've blown even that myth, that if you are too nuclear, are you saying that it's an all or nothing approach, that either I have a nuclear war or I live in peace? There is no in between.
This is my second finally, and this time it will be final, about starting the beating retreat drills on the Wagah border. Having won the war, do you think we have lost the plot?
Not really. I think the plot we will never lose, because we've lived with the plot. This was an attempt to find a solution to the plot or the knot that we have got tied into. I don't think we'll ever let our guard down. I think let us not underestimate our capacities. Sometimes just because we don't talk about them doesn't mean we don't have them. I think we've come out splendidly.
But what is the logic of starting the drills on the Wagah border?
I don't know. I don't know what the logic is. What is the message in all of this? I think only time will tell. But for the rest of it, the relationship is basically, it's now almost dead. And I don't see that reviving in a hurry. So that's how it is.
Mr. Pankaj Saran, thank you very much. Thank you for your time. And thank you for decoding lots of issues and answering many questions which are top of the mind of the citizens, like who won the war.
Thank you very much for asking all these tough questions. Thanks a lot.